The first snow of the season came down soft and sudden, that November morning, in the shadow of the Montana Rockies, blanketing everything in a hush that felt like the world holding its breath. Elowen stood at the warped window of her tiny, drafty cabin, her slender fingers trembling against the freezing glass as she watched those delicate flakes pile against her door like they meant to bury her alive. She was the forsaken widow, barely 5'1", with her slim, delicate frame wrapped in nothing but a threadbare shawl, and a heart that had already been broken once too often. 8 months since her husband passed, and the town had turned their backs faster than winter itself, sneering that she was too fragile for this harsh frontier life, too much of a burden to bother with. But long before dawn, while the rest of Whispering Pines still slept under their warm quilts, something shifted in the dark. Rourke, that towering giant of a cowboy, 6'9" of solid ranch-hardened muscle with shoulders broad enough to block out the sky, had seen her the day before, struggling with a shovel her thin arms could barely lift. Without a word to anyone, he took up his own heavy shovel in the bitter cold and cleared a perfect path from her doorstep all the way to the woodpile and the little barn. He piled the snow high on both sides so the wind could never blow it back in. When Elowen finally stepped outside at first light, her bare feet never once touched the freezing ground, not even for a second. And then his deep, quiet voice cut through the still morning air, from where he stood like a mountain just beyond the cleared path. Wait. If this tender moment in the first snow is already pulling at your heartstrings, do me a favor and smash that like button right now and subscribe, so you never miss a single beat of how this towering giant, Cowboy, turns one fragile widow's frozen world upside down. Rourke stood there like a mountain carved from the very Rockies themselves, his massive frame blocking the pale winter light. Those piercing ice-blue eyes locked on Elowen with a quiet intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. Wait, he rumbled again, his voice low and steady, like distant thunder rolling across the plains, that single word carrying more weight than most men could manage in a whole speech. She froze on her doorstep, one small bare foot hovering just above the pristine path he had carved through the snow, her delicate frame trembling not just from the biting cold, but from the sheer unexpected kindness staring back at her. Don't step out yet, Elowen. Not till you see what Maud done. She blinked up at him, her large luminous hazel green eyes wide with disbelief, those full soft lips parting in a soft gasp, as the reality of the cleared walkway finally sank in. The snow rose in perfect high walls on either side, smooth and deliberate, leading all the way to the woodpile and the little barn, where her scrawny milk cow lowed softly. Her feet, so fragile and pale against the bitter morning, never had to touch the freezing ground at all. Tears welled up instantly, hot and unbidden, spilling down her porcelain cheeks as she slipped the threadbare shawl tighter around her slender shoulders. You did this? For me?" Her voice came out a whisper, soft and broken, carrying all the years of rejection and loneliness that had hollowed her out since her husband's passing 8 months ago. Rourke gave a single slow nod, his broad shoulders shifting under his heavy flannel shirt, those tree-trunk arms hanging loose at his sides, as if he didn't quite know what to do with the emotion blooming across her delicate face. "Couldn't stand the thought of you out here fighting this snow alone," he said simply, the words falling quiet and honest between them. "Saw you yesterday, struggling with that shovel your arms ain't built for. Figured the least Mort could do was make sure you stayed warm and safe." He took one careful step closer, his heavy boots crunching just enough to remind her how impossibly large he was compared to her tiny 5'1" frame. Yet his movement stayed gentle, almost reverent, like he was afraid his very presence might shatter her. Elowen's heart hammered wildly in her chest as she finally stepped forward, her small feet landing on the packed path he had prepared, the sensation so warm, and, protected, it stole another sob from her throat. "Thank you, Rourke," she managed, her voice trembling with a gratitude so deep it hurt. No one has done anything like this for me since Smut came west as a mail-order bride 2 years back. My husband was kind enough, but when the fever took him, the town turned cruel fast. Called me too fragile, too much of a burden with my slim little body, and these useless delicate hands. Said a woman like me didn't belong on the frontier, that mote defreeze or starve before spring. Even my own blood back east wrote me off. Said Mot was always the weak one. The one who did never pull my own weight. She paused, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand, her long wavy auburn hair catching the early light like strands of fire against the white world around them. But I stayed. Mot had to. Because right after my husband passed, 2 little ones showed up on my doorstep, orphaned by that same fever that swept through Whispering Pines. Little Thomas, just 7, with his big solemn eyes and a cough that wouldn't quit, and sweet Lily, 5 years old, clinging to her brother like he was the only anchor left in her world. They had nowhere else. The townsfolk laughed when Mott took them in, sneered that a slip of a widow like me couldn't even keep herself fed, let alone raise motherless children, but Mott did. Mott sacrificed every scrap of warmth from my own bed on the coldest nights, wrapping them in my only extra blanket while I shivered under my thin shawl. Mott baked the last of my flour into bread so small it barely fed 3, yet Mott made sure they ate first, every single time. My gentle hands, the ones they mocked, learned to stitch their torn clothes and brew herbal teas from the roots. Mott foraged to ease Thomas's cough. Rourke listened without interrupting, his ice-blue eyes softening in a way no one in town had ever seen, that massive chest rising and falling slow, as he absorbed every word. He had heard the gossip himself down at the general store, the cruel laughter from the men who called her the forsaken widow, the women who whispered, "She'd be dead by Christmas, and good riddance to the burden." It had lit a quiet fire in his gut, the kind that made his imposing authority rise up without him ever needing to raise his voice. Now standing here, in the snow he had cleared for her, he felt something deeper stir, something protective and fierce that had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with the diamond strength he saw shining through her fragile appearance. "Come on inside," she said suddenly, her voice gaining a quiet resolve as she turned toward the cabin door. "It's the least Mot can do after what you've done. The children are still asleep, but they look won't be waking soon, and Mot V got a little coffee and some biscuits left from yesterday. Not much, but it's warm." Rourke hesitated only a moment before following, ducking low to clear the doorframe with his towering height, his broad shoulders filling the tiny space until the cabin felt almost too small for both of them. The inside was neat as a pin despite the poverty, every surface dusted and polished by her determined hands, a small fire crackling in the hearth that she had coaxed back to life with the last of her kindling. He watched as she moved with that graceful, slender precision, her petite frame bending to stoke the flames higher, adding a precious log from the pile he had made sure she could reach. The warmth spread slow and golden, chasing the chill from the corners, and Elowen's cheeks flushed a soft pink that made her look even more ethereally beautiful. She poured the weak coffee into 2 chipped mugs, handing him the larger one ve kep ite hot, both her small hands, their fingers brushing for the briefest second. That touch sent a jolt through Rourke, something warm and unfamiliar, that made his quiet heart thud heavier against his ribs. They sat at the rough-hewn table, and the conversation flowed in soft, halting waves. She told him more about the children, how Thomas had started calling her Mama Elowen in his sleep, how Lily had woven her a tiny crown of dried wildflowers last summer and declared her the prettiest queen in all Montana. Mot never planned to be a mother, Elowen admitted, her hazel-green eyes glistening again. Not like this. Not after losing my own chance at family back east when they cast me out for being too frail to marry the man they chose. But these little ones, they saw something in me worth holding on to. They begged me not to send them to the orphanage, said my hands were the gentlest they'd ever known and Mot could to turn away. Even when the town council came knocking last week, threatening to take them if I could to prove Mot could provide. Mot stood there in my threadbare dress, chin high, and told them Mot find a way, I always do. Rourke's large hand tightened around his mug, the ceramic looking tiny in his grip. His voice came low and steady when he finally spoke. "You ain't alone in this fight anymore, Elowen." Not while Mot met breathing. Mot V got a spread just over the ridge, big enough for 10 families, and enough hands on my ranch to keep the wolves at bay. Those kids deserve warmth and safety, and you deserve someone who sees the steel under that delicate skin of yours. Before she could answer, the soft patter of small feet sounded from the loft and Thomas and Lily appeared, rubbing sleep from their eyes. The boy's gaze landed on Rourke first, widening at the giant stranger filling their cabin. But then he looked at Elowen and broke into a gap-toothed grin. "Mama Elowen," he said, rushing to wrap his thin arms around her waist. "You made the fire bigger today. And the path outside sits like magic." Lily toddled right behind, her tiny hand slipping into Elowen's without hesitation, but her curious eyes kept darting up at Rourke with open wonder. "Is he the mountain man from the stories?" she whispered loudly. "The one who keeps everyone safe." Elowen laughed softly, a sound like bells in the quiet cabin, and ruffled Lily's hair with infinite tenderness. "Something like that, sweetheart. He cleared the snow so we wouldn't have to be cold." The children's instant acceptance wrapped around Rourke's heart like a rope, pulling tighter, and he found himself smiling for the first time in years, a slow, genuine curve of his lips that transformed his rugged face. They shared the simple breakfast together, Rourke insisting on stepping outside to split more wood, while Elowen prepared what little they had. He worked with effortless power, each swing of the axe precise and controlled, stacking the logs neatly by her door so she wouldn't have to strain her slender arms. Inside, Elowen moved with quiet grace, her homemaking skills turning scraps into something nourishing, the aroma of warming biscuits and weak coffee filling the air with a sense of home that had been missing for too long. By midday, the snow had stopped, but the wind picked up, howling around the cabin, like it wanted to test her resilience all over again. Rourke didn't leave. He stayed, helping Thomas mend a broken toy wagon with his big, careful hands, showing the boy how strength could be gentle. Lily climbed into Elowen's lap, whispering secrets about how she wished for a real family again, one with a papa who looked like a mountain. Elowen's heart ached with a yearning she hadn't let herself feel in months, her eyes drifting to Rourke across the room, drawn to the way his massive presence made the whole space feel safe and warm. As the afternoon light faded and the children napped again, worn out from the excitement, Elowen stood at the window, watching Rourke check the barn one last time. Her voice trembled when she called out to him. "Why are you being so kind to us? No one in Whispering Pines has lifted a finger since they labeled me the forsaken widow." They laughed when Mott begged for work at the fair last month, said, "A delicate woman like me could even scrub floors without breaking. Yet here you are, clearing paths and staying when you don't have to." He turned back to her, snow dusting his dark hair and beard, his ice-blue eyes burning with something deeper than simple duty. "Because Mott see you, Elowen," he answered, stepping close enough that she had to tilt her head way back to meet his gaze. "Mort see the way you sacrifice every comfort for those kids, the way your gentle hands heal what the world tries to break. And it moves me more than any ranch or gold could. But there's something you need to know before this snow melts." He paused, his massive frame suddenly tense, jaw tight as if the next words cost him. "The town council's meeting tomorrow at Moff Dawn. They re-voting on whether to take Thomas and Lily away from you, claiming a frail widow can to provide. They've got papers drawn up, and the banker who wants this land is pushing hard. Mort was going to ride in alone and put a stop to it with my name and my authority. But now, after seeing you with them, after feeling what you built here, Mort met asking you to come with me. Stand beside me when Mort tell them they'll have to go through both of us." Elowen's breath caught sharp, her delicate hands flying to her chest as fresh tears threatened. The thought of losing the children she had come to love as her own sent a wave of terror through her. But Rourke's offer wrapped around it like a shield. She opened her mouth to answer, heart pounding with a mix of fear and something brighter. Something that felt dangerously like hope and trust blooming in the frozen soil of her soul. But before she could speak, the distant sound of approaching horses cut through the quiet, and Rourke's eyes narrowed toward the tree line, where 3 riders from town were cutting through the fresh snow, their faces set with the same cruel mockery that had haunted her for months. The distant sound of approaching horses cut through the quiet, and Rourke's eyes narrowed toward the tree line, where 3 riders from town were cutting through the fresh snow, their faces set with the same cruel mockery that had haunted her for months. Elowen felt her slender body go rigid beside him, her small hand instinctively reaching for the edge of the cabin door as if it could shield her from what was coming. The lead rider was Harlan Beck, the town banker. A wiry man with a pinched face and eyes like cold steel, flanked by 2 council members, whose laughter had already echoed through the general store more times than she could count. They reined in their horses, just at the edge of the cleared path Rourke had made, their gazes sweeping over the pristine walkway with open disbelief before landing on Elowen's said delicate frame, with the same sneering pity they always wore. "Well now, look at this," Harlan drawled, swinging down from his saddle with a theatrical flourish that sent snow flying. "The forsaken widowess got herself a snow-clearing fairy godmother, does she? Or is that giant shadow behind you finally stepping out of the hills to play hero?" His companions chuckled low and mean, one of them spitting tobacco juice into the white drifts as if to mark their territory. "We came to deliver the papers official, like Mrs. Elowen. Council S moved the meeting up to first light tomorrow instead of waiting. Seems the good folks of Whispering Pines don't want to drag this out any longer than necessary. A frail little thing like you, barely strong enough to lift a bucket of water, trying to raise 2 orphaned young uns. It's a cruel joke on those poor children, and we aim to put it right by placing them with proper families who can actually provide." Elowen's breath hitched sharp in her throat, her large luminous hazel-green eyes filling with a storm of hurt and defiance as she stepped forward onto the path Rourke had prepared, her petite 5'1" frame looking even smaller against the bulk of the 3 men and their horses. "You have no right," she whispered at first, then lifted her chin higher, her voice gaining that quiet diamond strength they could never break. "These children are mine in every way that matters. Mortvi kept them warm, fed them from my own scarce table, sacrificed every extra scrap so they would to know hunger or cold. My hands might look delicate to you, but they've stitched wounds and rocked nightmares away when no one else cared. You call it a joke, but Mort call it family." Harlan's laugh rang out harsh and brittle, cutting through the winter air like a whip. "Family? From a mail-order bride who couldn't even keep her first husband alive through one Montana winter? Too slim, too weak, too much of a burden. Just like your own blood wrote you off for back east. They told us in the letters we saw, you know. Abandoned you because you were always the fragile one who'd never survive without a strong man propping you up. And now you begging the town to let you play mother. The council's already got 3 solid homes lined up, places where those kids want to have to worry about their so-called mama fainting from the work." He thrust a folded sheaf of papers toward her, his gloved hand extended like an accusation. "Sign it, now, and spare yourself the humiliation tomorrow. Or watch us take them while the whole town watches." The words landed like blows on Elowen's porcelain skin, her full soft lips trembling as fresh tears threatened to spill, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she reached out with her slender fingers, ready to snatch those papers and tear them to pieces if she had to. Before she could, Rourke moved. 1 step, that was all it took, his massive 6'9" frame sliding in front of her like a living wall of muscle and quiet authority, blocking the banker's view completely. His broad shoulders cast a long shadow over the snow, tree trunk arms loose at his sides, yet radiating the kind of power that made horses shift uneasily and grown men swallow hard. The air itself seemed to still around him. "Those children stay with Elowen," Rourke said, his deep voice low and steady, each word dropping like a stone into still water. "No papers, no meeting, no taking. Not while Mort met standing here." His ice-blue eyes bored into Harlan's without blinking, the rugged lines of his square jaw set in that stoic way that needed no raised voice or clenched fists to command obedience. Mort seen her strength. Seen her sacrifice her own warmth so those little ones could sleep sound. Seen hands you call useless heal what this town broke. She has no burden. She has the steel this frontier needs. And if any one of you thinks different, you'll answer to me and the full weight of my ranch behind it. Not with guns or fists, just the simple truth that my name and my land say she and those children are provided for from this day forward. Publicly. Loudly. So the whole town hears it before dawn." Harlan's face paled under the winter sun, his companions exchanging uneasy glances as the giant cowboy's imposing presence filled the space between them and the cabin. The banker's hand faltered on the papers, the cruel smirk slipping into something closer to uncertainty. "You can just claim her like that, Rourke," he blustered, but his voice lacked its earlier bite. "She's a widow with nothing, a delicate woman who look long break under real work. The council won. T stand for some mountain man swooping in to play savior. Rourke's response was a single slow nod, his massive chest rising once as he took another half-step forward, close enough now that the riders had to crane their necks to meet his gaze. Watch me. Moat just did. Now ride on back and tell them the vote's off. Elowen and the children are under my protection. The words carried such quiet finality that the horses stamped and snorted, sensing the shift in power. Harlan muttered something under his breath about this not being over, but he jammed the papers back into his coat and swung into his saddle with far less swagger than when he arrived. The three of them wheeled their mounts and rode off through the snow, leaving deep tracks that looked small and insignificant compared to the path Rourke had already cleared for her. Elowen stood there trembling in the aftermath, the cold wind tugging at her long wavy auburn hair, her delicate shoulders slumping as the adrenaline ebbed and left only raw emotion in its wake. She turned to Rourke, her luminous hazel-green eyes searching his rugged face with a mixture of awe and something softer, deeper, that made her heart stutter in her chest. "You didn't have to do that," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying all the gratitude of a woman who had faced the world alone for too long. "They've mocked me for months, called me too frail for this life, too weak to mother those babies. Even my own sister wrote from back east after my husband died, saying Moat was a burden she could carry anymore, that sending me west as a mail-order bride was the kindest thing they could do. Because at least their Moat D be someone else's problem. But you stood there like a mountain and told them no, for me, for us." He looked down at her, his piercing ice-blue eyes softening in a way that melted the last of the winter chill between them, one large hand lifting slowly to brush a stray snowflake from her porcelain cheek, with a gentleness that belied his size. "Could stand by and watch them break what you've fought so hard to build," he murmured, the words rumbling from deep in his barrel chest. "You've got a heart bigger than this whole ranch of mine, Elowen. Moot saw it the moment. Watched you carry that scrawny cow as water bucket yesterday, arms shaking but never quitting. And those kids, they see it too." He paused, his thumb lingering just a heartbeat longer on her skin before he pulled back, respecting the fragile space between them, even as something warm and undeniable sparked in the air. Inside the cabin, the children had woken to the sound of the voices, Thomas and Lily peeking from the loft, with wide eyes that quickly filled with relief when they saw Rourke still there. "Mama Elowen," Thomas called, scrambling down the ladder on his thin legs, his little cough barely there today, thanks to the herbal tea she'd brewed the night before. "Did the mean men leave? They always come and say bad things about how you re too small to be our mama. But you re the best mama ever." He threw his arms around her waist, burying his face in her threadbare shawl, while Lily toddled straight to Rourke without a trace of fear, tugging at the hem of his heavy flannel shirt with her tiny hand. "You re big like a bear," she said solemnly, tilting her head way back to look up at him. "But you re a nice bear. Will you stay and keep the snow from taking our house? Mama Elowen gives us all her blankets, you know. She never keeps any for herself. She says her heart keeps her warm enough." The innocent words from the children wrapped around Elowen's heart like a healing balm. Her slender fingers stroking Thomas' hair as fresh tears slipped down her cheeks, not from sorrow this time, but from the profound validation she had craved for so long. Rourke knelt slowly, bringing his massive frame down to the little girl's level, so he would tower over her, his large hand gentle as he accepted the wildflower crown she had hastily made from the dried ones on the windowsill. "Mot luk stay as long as you need me, Lily," he told her, his voice low and full of promise. "And your mama here, she says stronger than any storm this frontier can throw. Mot aim to make sure the whole town knows it tomorrow when Mot stand beside her at that meeting." They spent the rest of the afternoon in a cocoon of quiet warmth that felt like the first real home any of them had known in ages. Elowen moved about the tiny kitchen with her graceful, petite precision, her homemaking skills turning the last of the flour and a few precious eggs Rourke had quietly fetched from his saddlebag into a simple but nourishing supper. The aroma of baking filled the cabin, chasing away the last shadows of the rider's cruelty, and Rourke watched her from the table, where he helped Thomas mend the broken wagon wheel, with careful, powerful hands that never once slipped. Every so often their eyes would meet across the room, a lingering glance that sent a slow heat blooming in Elowen's chest, the kind of attraction that built like a fire under deep snow, steady and undeniable. As evening fell, and the children played quietly by the hearth, with the extra kindling Rourke had split earlier, Elowen found herself drawn to sit beside him on the rough bench, her slim shoulder brushing the solid warmth of his arm. The contact was brief, accidental at first, but neither pulled away. "You know," she said softly, her voice weaving into the crackle of the fire like a confession, long overdue, "when Mort first arrived west, as that mail-order bride, Mort thought this land would be my salvation. My family back east had made it clear. Mott was too delicate for their society parties and arranged matches, too prone to fainting spells from the heat, too slender to bear strong sons, they said. So they packed me off with a one-way ticket and a letter saying, 'Don't come back unless you make something of yourself.' My husband was decent, but illness took him before we could build anything deep. Then the children came, and suddenly Mort had a reason to fight. Mort sacrificed every comfort, every extra bite, every hour of sleep, because watching them thrive under my care healed something broken inside me. And now you see that. You defended it in front of those men who've laughed at me for months. It makes me believe maybe Mort met, not the burden everyone claims." Rourke's large hand covered hers where it rested on the bench between them. The contrast of his calloused palm against her soft, delicate skin, sending a shiver of something profound through both of them. "You re no burden, Elowen," he answered, the words rumbling low and sincere. "You re the kind of woman who turns a cold cabin into a home with nothing but heart, and those gentle hands they mock. Mut got my own ghosts, you know. Lost my folks young to a raid out on the plains, built this ranch from nothing because Mut swore. Mut never let anyone feel as alone as Mut did. Watching you with Thomas and Lily, it's stirring up feelings Mut thought were buried under years of snow and silence. Tomorrow at that meeting I want to just stand beside you. Mort look lunk claim you proper. If you look lunk, let me. Not out of pity, out of seeing the woman you truly are, fragile in body, but unbreakable in spirit." The words hung between them like a promise, the firelight painting golden warmth across her heart-shaped face and his rugged features, their fingers intertwining slowly. As the children soft laughter drifted over. Elowen felt her breath catch, a yearning so deep it ached rising in her chest, the slow burn pull toward this giant protector growing stronger kept it hot every shared breath. Outside the wind howled louder, testing the cabin's walls, but inside safety wrapped around them like the path he had cleared through the snow. They talked late into the night, after tucking the children into bed with extra blankets. Rourke insisted on providing from his saddle roll, their voices low and intimate, by the dying fire. He told her of the long, lonely winters on his spread, how he had watched her from afar for weeks, drawn by her quiet resilience even as the town sneered. She shared the nights she had cried alone after the children slept, wondering if her delicate frame would ever be enough. Each confession wove their hearts closer, trust blooming like the first spring crocus pushing through frost. Yet as midnight approached and Rourke prepared to bed down on the floor near the door to stand guard, a soft knock sounded at the cabin, faint but insistent. Elowen's eyes widened in fresh alarm as she opened the door a crack to find a breathless young boy from the livery stable, snow-caked on his coat, clutching an envelope sealed with the council S-mark. "Message for you, ma'am," he panted. "They said to deliver it tonight. The meeting ain't at dawn anymore. It's moved to midnight tomorrow and the judge from Helena is riding in special because the banker claims there's new evidence. Your eastern family has filed to take the children back east as wards. They say you unfit. And this time they've got signed papers from your own blood." Elowen's hand flew to her mouth, the fragile peace they had built shattering in an instant as Rourke rose behind her, his massive frame tense with protective fury, the unresolved threat hanging heavy in the frozen air between them. Elowen's hand flew to her mouth, the fragile peace they had built shattering in an instant as Rourke rose behind her, his massive frame tense with protective fury, the unresolved threat hanging heavy in the frozen air between them. The young stable boy shifted nervously on the doorstep, snow melting from his boots as he thrust the sealed envelope into her trembling fingers, his eyes darting up at the towering cowboy, like he expected the mountain man to swallow him whole. "It's true, ma'am," the boy whispered before turning and bolting back into the night, his pony's hooves crunching away through the fresh drifts. "They pulling out all the stops now. Whole town's buzzing about it." She broke the seal with shaking hands, the paper crackling like brittle ice under her delicate touch, and read the words aloud in a voice that started soft but grew steadier. "They cape ite hot every line." Diamond resilience shining through the fresh wave of pain. It was from the town council, signed by Harlan Beck himself, and countersigned by a judge in Helena, detailing how her Ove kept no blood relatives back east, had filed a formal claim just yesterday. Her sister, the one who had written her off years ago as the frail burden no proper family could afford, had apparently received word of the widow's situation through some distant cousin, and decided the children would be better raised in civilized society, rather than with a delicate slip of a woman who could barely keep herself alive on the frontier. The letter listed every cruel detail. Elephant's petite frame deemed too weak for the physical demands of motherhood. Her history of fainting spells from back east twisted into proof of unfitness. Even the way the town had mocked her at the harvest fair last fall, when she begged for any work scrubbing floors or mending clothes, calling her too fragile to last another Montana winter. They wanted the children on the next stage east, at first light, after the midnight meeting, and they expected her to hand them over without a fight, or face the full weight of the law. Rourke's large hand settled gently on her slender shoulder, the warmth of his calloused palm seeping through the thin fabric of her blouse, like a promise against the chill seeping in from the open door. "Close it up, Eloin," he said, his deep voice low and commanding, yet wrapped in that surprising gentleness that always caught her off guard. "Ain't in no need to read the rest of their poison tonight. Those words are lies dressed up in fancy ink, and tomorrow at midnight, we gonna burn them to ash with the truth." He guided her back inside, ducking under the doorframe with effortless grace for a man his size, and shut the door firmly against the wind that howled like it wanted to tear their fragile sanctuary apart. The children had stirred from their beds again at the commotion, Thomas rubbing his eyes, and Lily clutching her rag doll, their small faces pale in the firelight as they sensed the shift in the air. "Mama Eloin?" Thomas asked, his little voice cracking with the remnants of his cough. "Why do the men keep coming? Do they still think you too small to be our mama?" Lily toddled straight to Eloin and buried her face in the widow's skirt, tiny arms wrapping tight around the delicate woman's legs. "Don't let them take us," she mumbled into the fabric. "You give us your blankets every night. You sing us songs when the wind scares us. You our real mama, even if you look like a pretty snowflake that might blow away." Those innocent words from the children hit Eloin like a sacred blow to the heart, her luminous, hazel-green eyes filling with tears that she refused to let fall completely. She dropped to her knees on the worn floorboards, her slim, petite frame folding gracefully despite the exhaustion etching lines around her full, soft lips, and pulled both children into her arms. "Mott met not going anywhere, my loves," she whispered fiercely, her voice breaking but her hold steady as a rock. "Mort sacrificed my own warmth for you. On nights colder than this, gave you every extra morsel from my plate, used these hands, they call useless, to brew teas that eased your fevers and mend the holes in your clothes so you wouldn't feel the wind. My own family back east abandoned me because they said Mott was too delicate to be useful, too prone to frailty to ever run a proper household or bear strong children. They packed me off as a mail-order bride, like Mott was damaged goods no one wanted close. But you too, you saw me. You chose me, and would choose you right back, every single day." Rourke watched from the shadows near the hearth, his ice-blue eyes burning with a quiet intensity that made the fire seem dim by comparison. He had never been one for many words. This giant rancher whose spread covered thousands of acres, and whose quiet authority commanded respect from every hand who worked for him. But seeing Eloin on her knees, pouring love into those motherless children, cracked something wide open inside his massive chest. He crossed the room in 2 long strides, lowering his towering 6'9" frame onto the bench so he could be closer without looming, his broad shoulders casting a protective shadow over the little family. "They rewrite about one thing," he rumbled softly, reaching out with one tree trunk arm to rest a gentle hand on Thomas's back. You are their mama, Elowen. The real kind. The kind that turns a freezing cabin into a home with nothing but heart and those gentle talents everyone else mocks. Mott seen it clear as day since the first snow fell, and Mott cleared that path so your feet wouldn't have to touch the cold. He told them then, in his low, steady way, about the plan for tomorrow's midnight meeting. The judge from Helena was coming, because the banker had stirred up enough dust to make it official. But Rourke's ranch held weight in these parts. Land grants and cattle contracts that stretched back years. And his name carried the kind of imposing authority that even Eastern judges listened to when it came to frontier matters. Mot Luglung stand with you, he said, his piercing gaze locking on Elowen's tear-streaked face, publicly. In front of the whole council and whoever else shows up to gawk. Mot Luglung tell them straight that you and the children are under my protection now, that my spread has room and warmth enough for all of you, and that any claim from blood who abandoned you once has no standing here. Not when Motbef seen your resilience with my own eyes. Not when these little ones look at you, like you hung the moon. The night stretched long after. The children finally drifted back to sleep. Tucked under extra blankets, Rourke had insisted on adding from his saddle roll. Elowen moved about the cabin, with her quiet, homemaking grace, her slender hands preparing a simple late supper from the last of the supplies, turning dried beans and a bit of salt pork into a nourishing stew that filled the small space with savory warmth. Rourke helped where he could, splitting more wood outside in the bitter dark so the fire would never die. His powerful swings precise and controlled, each log stacked neatly by the door, where her delicate arms could reach without strain. Every so often their eyes would meet through the window, a lingering glance that sent slow heat curling through Elowen's veins, the slow burn pull between them growing thicker than the snow piling against the cabin walls. When they sat together at the table once more, bowls steaming between them, the conversation turned deeper, more intimate, the kind of talk that wove two lonely souls together, thread by careful thread. Elowen spoke of the sacred sacrifices she had made since taking in Thomas and Lily, how she had gone without proper meals for weeks so the children could have seconds, how she had used her gentle healing skills learned from an old frontier midwife to nurse Thomas through his lingering cough. They kept tehat roots and herbs foraged in secret, because the town apothecary refused to serve a woman they called too frail to pay. Mott never asked for much, she admitted, her voice soft and flowing like the warm light from the lantern, her long wavy auburn hair catching golden highlights as she leaned closer. Just a chance to prove Mott could build something good, despite this delicate body of mine. But the cruelty never stopped. At the town fair last month, they put me up on that little stage for anyone needing help. A cruel joke of an auction, they called it, parading widows and orphans like livestock. Men laughed when Mott stood there in my patched dress, saying a fragile bride like me would snap like a twig under real ranch work. No one bid. Not one. Until you rode up later that day, Rourke, and quietly paid the full price for my labor contract, even though Mott begged only for the hardest chores. You never collected on it. You duete watched over me instead. Rourke's large hand found hers again. Across the table, the contrast of his rough strength against her soft, porcelain skin sending a spark through both of them that neither ignored this time. Mott watched because Mott saw what they couldn't, he murmured, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder yet gentle as falling snow. That auction was meant to break you, Elowen, a public humiliation dressed as charity. But your chin stayed high, your eyes steady, and those children stood beside you, holding your skirt like you were their whole world. It moved something in me, what thought was frozen solid after years alone on the ranch. Mott got my own share of ghosts too. Lost my wife and unborn child to a fever 10 years back, swore off ever letting anyone close again because the pain carved too deep. But seeing you sacrifice your scarce comfort for those little ones, hearing how your blood betrayed you by calling you a burden, and shipping you west like unwanted freight, it woke me up. Made me want to be the shield you deserve. The one who clears paths through the snow before you even wake, who stands between you and every cruel word the world throws. Their fingers intertwined slowly, the touch lingering as the fire crackled low and the wind moaned outside like a jealous thing. Elowen felt her heart open in a way it hadn't since arriving as that hopeful yet terrified mail-order bride. The yearning in her luminous hazel-green eyes, mirroring the quiet fire in his ice-blue ones. She leaned in just a fraction, her petite frame drawn to his massive warmth, like a moth to safe flame. And for a long moment, the only sound was their breathing and the soft sighs of the sleeping children. He told her more then, stories of long winters, where his imposing size had kept predators at bay, but left his heart empty. How he had started noticing her months ago, when she first took in the orphans, her gentle resilience shining brighter than any rancher's gold. Mort never planned on claiming anyone again, he confessed, his thumb tracing a slow circle on the back of her hand. But, you and those babies, you rewriting every rule Mort set for myself. The hours slipped by in that cocoon of healing intimacy, Elowen sharing how her domestic talents had saved them more than once, turning threadbare scraps into warm clothes for the children, baking bread from near-empty bins to stretch meals that kept hunger at bay. Rourke listened with rapt attention, his stoic face softening into rare smiles that transformed the rugged lines of his square jaw and dark beard. He spoke of his ranch hands who already respected his decision to protect her. How word had spread quietly that the giant cowboy had chosen his side, and no one in Whispering Pines would cross him lightly. The slow-burn romance between them deepened with every shared secret, trust blooming like fragile flowers pushing through the first snow, their contrasting sizes making every brush of shoulder or hand feel electric and profoundly right. Yet as the clock on the mantel crept toward the small hours, and Rourke finally insisted she get some rest, while he kept watch by the door, Elowen paused at the ladder to the loft, turning back him with a soft smile that held all the unspoken promise of tomorrow. "You've given me more than a cleared path through the snow, Rourke," she whispered. "You've given me back the belief that my delicate heart can still build a life worth fighting for. And with you beside me, at that meeting, Mort, think we just might win." He rose to his full towering height, crossing to her in one stride, and cupping her heart-shaped face in his large, gentle hands, tilting her chin up so their eyes met fully in the dim light. "We will win, Elowen," he vowed, the words carrying the full weight of his imposing authority and the tenderness only she seemed to draw out. "Because what we're rebuilding here ain't fragile. It is diamond strong, just like you." She climbed the ladder then, leaving him to settle into his watch with a blanket, and the dying fire, her mind swirling vacate hot hope, and the slow steady pull toward the massive protector, who had stepped into her frozen world, like destiny itself. Sleep came fitful but warmer than it had in months, wrapped in dreams of cleared paths and strong arms that never let the cold touch her again. Dawn broke gray and heavy, the snow still falling in lazy spirals that blanketed the world anew. But inside the cabin warmth held firm thanks to the wood Rourke had split through the night. They broke their fast together. Quietly, the children chattering with newfound excitement about the big man who was going to make the mean council go away, their innocent faith in Elowen's gentle strength, and Rourke's mountain-like presence healing cracks no one else had seen. Thomas even offered Rourke his most prized marble, a small glass orb he had carried since before the fever took his parents, declaring that the giant cowboy needed luck too, because Mama Elowen said big hearts need big protection sometimes. The day passed in careful preparation. Elowen, mending her best calico dress with her precise delicate stitches so she would look presentable at the midnight meeting. Rourke riding out briefly to his ranch to gather a few trusted hands, who would stand as silent witnesses to his public declaration of protection. When he returned, the children greeted him like a long-lost father figure, Lily insisting he carry her on his broad shoulders around the cabin while she giggled and declared him the tallest papa in Montana. Elowen watched with a heart so full it ached, her yearning for this kind of family, deepening into something profound and undeniable. The contrast of her fragile, slender beauty against his massive, gentle power, creating a picture of perfect balance she had never dared imagine. As evening deepened and the time for the meeting drew near, they bundled the children warmly and hitched Rourke's sturdy wagon, the cleared path from her door, making the short journey to town feel like a victory already won. The ride was quiet but charged. Elowen nestled beside him on the bench with Thomas and Lily tucked between them under thick blankets, her small hand slipping into his large one halfway there as silent reassurance passed between them. The town lights flickered ahead like hostile eyes, the council hall already filling with curious faces, eager to watch the frail widow's final humiliation or the giant cowboy's bold stand. They arrived just as the clock struck 11. The judge from Helena already seated at the head table with a stern expression. Harlan Beck smirking from the side with his papers spread out like weapons. The room fell into a hush as Rourke helped Elowen down from the wagon, his imposing frame drawing every eye, while her delicate presence made more than one woman whisper behind gloved hands. The children clung to her skirt, their small voices piping up bravely when the judge called the meeting to order, declaring the case of the orphaned wards and the unfit guardian. Harlan launched into his accusations first, painting Elowen as the forsaken widow too fragile for frontier life, citing the Eastern family's signed claim and the town's long history of mocking her at mof auctions and fairs. She stood tall as her petite frame allowed, chin high, ready to speak her truth, with the diamond resilience that had carried her this far. But before she could utter a word, Rourke stepped forward, his massive 6'9" presence filling the hall like a force of nature, voice ringing out clear and authoritative without ever needing to shout. "This woman and these children are mine to protect now," he declared to the stunned assembly, his ice-blue eyes sweeping the room until even the judge sat straighter. "Mort claimed them publicly, before all of you, with the full weight of my ranch and my name. She has sacrificed more than any of you know, turned her gentle hands into the very tools that kept those little ones alive and loved. Her blood may have betrayed her, but Mort stand here as proof that true family ain't about size or strength of body. It's about the heart that never quits. And if any paper from back east or any banker in this town thinks different, they'll have to come through me first." The room erupted in murmurs, some faces softening, others twisting in resentment. But the judge called for order and asked Elowen to speak. She did, her voice steady and flowing with emotional depth, detailing her reluctant motherhood, her sacred sacrifices, the way the children had seen her true worth from the start. Tears glistened in her luminous eyes but never fell, her resilience shining brighter than the lanterns overhead. The judge listened, nodding slowly, the scales tipping visibly as Rourke's quiet authority and Elowen's heartfelt testimony wove together into an unbreakable case. It seemed victory was within reach, the cruel joke of her frailty turning into destiny under the giant cowboy's shield. But just as the judge reached for his gavel to render a decision, the door to the hall burst open on a gust of icy wind, and a tall, thin woman in Eastern traveling clothes stormed in, her face a mirror of Elowen's delicate features, twisted now with cold calculation. "Sister," the woman spat, eyes narrowing on the widow's slender form. "Moat come to collect what's ours. The children, and your duty to the family name. You were always the burden we never wanted, and this farce ends tonight." Elowen's breath caught sharp, her hand flying to Rourke's arm as the room fell into shocked silence. The sudden arrival of her betraying blood relative, shattering the moment of triumph and leaving the entire future hanging by a thread once more. The room fell into shocked silence as the tall, thin woman in Eastern traveling clothes stormed in on a gust of icy wind, her face a mirror of Elowen's delicate features, twisted now with cold calculation. "Sister," the woman spat, eyes narrowing on the widow's slender form like a hawk spotting prey. "Moth come to collect what's ours. The children and your duty to the family name. You were always the burden we never wanted, and this farce ends tonight." Elowen's breath caught sharp, her petite 5'1" frame going rigid beside Rourke, as the words sliced through the crowded council hall like a winter blade. The lanterns flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the wooden benches, packed with townsfolk who had gathered for the midnight spectacle, their faces a mix of cruel curiosity and uneasy whispers. Her sister, Maud, stood there in her fine wool, traveling cloak and polished boots, the same high cheekbones and heart-shaped face as Elowen's, but hardened by years of Eastern propriety that had never once softened toward the frail little sister she had helped ship west like unwanted freight. Maud's voice carried through the hall with sharp, mocking precision, echoing off the rafters, as she pointed one gloved finger straight at Elowen. "Look at her. standing there in that patched calico, like some delicate porcelain doll pretending to be a mother. Too slim, too weak, too prone to fainting spells even back home when the heat rose or the work got hard. Our family cast you out for good reason, Elowen. You were always the fragile one, the burden who couldn't pull her weight at society teas or help with the household ledgers. Sending you as a mail-order bride was mercy, and now you drag these poor orphans into your weakness. Mott V traveled all this way through snow and hardship because blood demands Mott save them from your so-called care. The townsfolk murmured louder, some nodding in agreement with the familiar cruelty that had labeled Elowen the forsaken widow for months, others shifting uncomfortably as the Eastern woman's venom filled the space. Harlan Beck smirked from his seat beside the judge, his pinched face glowing with satisfaction, as if Maud's arrival was the final nail in the coffin. Elowen felt her luminous hazel-green eyes sting vacapite hot tears she refused to shed, her full soft lips pressing into a thin line as the old wounds ripped open fresh. Maud's words dragged her back to those final days back east, the family parlor, where they had packed her trunk with disdainful efficiency, calling her too delicate for their world, too much of a liability to keep under their roof. You'll thank us one day, Maud had sneered then, just as she sneered now. At least out west, some rough man might take pity on your frail bones before you break entirely. And here you are, proving us right by clinging to these children like a vine that chokes what it touches. Before Elowen could find her voice, Thomas and Lily broke from her skirt and rushed forward on their small legs, the boy's thin frame trembling, vacapite, hot righteous anger despite his lingering cough, the girl's tiny hands balled into fists at her sides. You mean? Thomas shouted, his voice piping loud and clear through the hushed hall, drawing every eye to the children's innocent defense. Mama Elowen isn't a burden. She gives us her blankets every night so we don't get cold. She makes us tea from special roots when Maud cough, and her hands are the gentlest in the whole world. She sacrificed her supper last week so Lily and me could have seconds, even though her tummy was rumbling loud enough for us to hear. Don't you call her weak? She's the strongest mama there is, even if she looks like a pretty snowflake. Lily nodded fiercely beside her brother, her little voice carrying surprising force as she stamped one foot on the floorboards. Yeah. You go away, mean lady. Mama Elowen sings us songs and rocks us when the wind howls, and she never ever complains even when her arms shake carrying water. She's our real mama, not you. The children's words hung in the air like a sacred shield, their instant recognition of Elowen's true worth wrapping around her heart and squeezing tight with healing warmth. Whispers rippled through the crowd now, some women dabbing at Mott their eyes, the cruel mockery from earlier cracking, under the pure honesty of two motherless orphans who had found home in the delicate widow's arms. Rourke stepped forward then, his massive 6'9" frame, moving with that quiet, imposing authority that silenced the room without a single raised word. He placed one large hand gently on Elowen's slender shoulder, the warmth of his calloused palm seeping through her thin shawl like a promise carved from the mountains themselves, steadying her delicate frame against the storm of her sister's betrayal. His ice-blue eyes locked on Maud, without blinking, his barrel chest rising slow and deliberate as the tree-trunk arms at his sides radiated power that made even the judge sit straighter in his chair. This woman you call a burden has more strength in her gentle heart than your whole Eastern family put together, he rumbled, his deep voice rolling through the hall like distant thunder, yet controlled and commanding. Motfi seen her sacrifice every scrap of comfort so these children could eat and sleep warm. Motfi watched her hands, the ones you mock as useless, brew healing teas and stitch clothes from nothing while the town laughed, and called her too frail for frontier life. She took in these orphans, when no one else would turn a drafty cabin into a home, with nothing but resilience and love. Her blood may have abandoned her, shipped her west as a mail-order bride, to be someone else's problem. But that don't make her weak. It makes the betrayal all the more shameful. And I stand here before this council and this judge and every last one of you, claiming her and these children as mine to protect, publicly, with the full weight of my ranch, my land, and my name behind it. No papers from back east, no cruel sister, no banker-s schemes will change that. She's no burden. She's the diamond this town needs, fragile in body but unbreakable where it counts. The words landed with the force of his imposing presence, the stoic giant cowboy's quiet authority filling every corner of the hall and shifting the very air. Maud's face flushed an angry red, her delicate features twisting further as she opened her mouth to retort. But Rourke's steady gaze pinned her in place, without him ever needing to move closer. Harlan Beck sputtered from his seat, trying to wave the papers again, but the judge raised a hand for silence, his stern expression softening as he looked between the towering rancher, the tearful yet resilient widow, and the brave children still clutching Elowin's skirt. The townsfolk murmured now with growing approval, the cruel jokes from past auctions and fairs, fading under the weight of witnessed truth, some men even nodding in respect toward Rourke's stand. Elowin drew a shaky breath, her luminous hazel-green eyes lifting to meet Rourke's gratitude, and something deeper, warmer bloomed in her chest like the first thaw after endless winter. She stepped forward beside him, her petite frame dwarfed by his massive one, yet shining with diamond-like resolve, her voice flowing soft but steady as she addressed the room and her sister directly. Maud, you and the family turned your backs when Moat needed you most. You called me too delicate for your world, packed me off with a ticket west, and a letter saying don't return unless Mott proved Mott wasn't a burden anymore. My husband passed, and instead of offering help, you wrote that Mott was better off forgotten. But these children saw me. They begged me to be their mama when the fever took their parents, and Mott said yes, because my heart would to let me turn away. Mott vague on without warmth, without proper meals, using every homemaking skill Mott possessed to stretch flour and herbs into nourishment that kept them thriving. My hands may tremble in the cold, but they've never failed these little ones. And now, with Rourke standing beside me like the mountain he is, Mutt not alone anymore. Mutt met not the forsaken widow, the town Mutt met a mother, a survivor, and Mutt deserved this chance to build something real. The judge cleared his throat, the gavel hovering as he absorbed the testimony, the public vindication hanging thick in the lantern-lit air. Maud sneered one last time, her voice dripping venom as she clutched her traveling bag tighter. This is tea over, Elowin. Moat have more documents coming on the next stage, signed affidavits from doctors back east declaring, your frailty makes you unfit. You Lugluang crumble under real responsibility just like always, and those children will be mine to raise properly in civilized society. But even as she spoke, the hall's mood had shifted, the cruel undercurrent, giving way to murmurs of support for the giant cowboy and his delicate charge. A short recess was called, so the judge could review the new claims with his clerk, the room buzzing as folks stood to stretch and whisper. Rourke guided Elowin and the children to a quiet corner near the pot-bellied stove, his large hand never leaving the small of her back, the protective touch sending slow waves of heat through her slender body, despite the winter chill seeping under the doors. The children climbed into her lap on the bench, Thomas resting his head against her shoulder, while Lily twined her fingers in Elowin's long wavy auburn hair, their small bodies a living reminder of the reluctant motherhood that had healed her soul. You were so brave. Mama Elowin, Thomas whispered, his voice muffled against her shawl. That mean lady does to know how you stay up all night when the wind scares us, giving us your extra socks so our toes don't to freeze. Rourke knelt to their level, his massive frame folding with surprising grace, and offered each child a piece of hard candy from his vest pocket, his ice-blue eyes warm as he rumbled. Your mama asks the strongest person in this room, little ones. Stronger than me, even, because she does it all with a heart that never quits. Elowin's full soft lips curved into a trembling smile as she met Rourke's gaze over the children's heads, the slow burn intimacy between them deepening in that stolen moment amid the chaos. His piercing eyes held hers with quiet intensity, the contrast of his rugged square jaw and dark beard against her porcelain fragility, creating a pull that felt as inevitable as the snow outside. You didn't have to claim us so boldly, she murmured, her voice a gentle flow of emotion that wrapped around him like the warmth from the stove. In front of everyone. After all the mockery in the auction where they paraded me like a joke because I looked too frail to scrub a floor or mend a harness, you stood there like my shield, your authority turning their laughter to silence. It heals something, Maud didn't know was still broken. He leaned closer, his broad shoulders blocking the rest of the room from view, one large hand cupping her delicate cheek with a tenderness that belied his size, thumb brushing away a stray tear with infinite care. Maud claimed you because it's the truth, Elowen, he answered, the words rumbling low and intimate just for her ears. Maud watched you sacrifice your scarce comfort night after night. Seen those gentle hands work miracles on scraps and herbs while the town sneered. Your blood's betrayal cut deep, but it brought you here, to me, to these babies who see your worth clearer than anyone. My ranch has room for all of us, warmth enough to chase every chill from your slim shoulders and laughter enough to fill the empty places. If you look have me, not just as protector, but as the man who stands beside you through every storm. Moat look clear every path, split every log, and build a life where your delicate beauty thrives instead of merely surviving. Their foreheads nearly touched in the quiet corner, the air between them charged with unspoken yearning. Her petite frame drawn instinctively toward his massive warmth, like a flower turning to the sun. The children sensed it too, giggling softly as Lily declared in a loud whisper, "He's gonna be our papa, isn't he, Mama?" Raucous eyes crinkled at the corners with a rare, genuine smile that transformed his stoic face, and Elowen felt her heart open wider than the Montana sky. Trust and love blooming slow and sure in the wake of betrayal's shadow. The recess ended too soon, the judge calling them back with a firm rap of the gavel. Maud sat rigid on the opposite side, her eyes shooting daggers, but the room's energy had changed. The public protection Rourke offered casting a long, unbreakable shadow over her claims. The judge summarized the testimonies, his voice measured as he weighed the Eastern documents against the living proof before him. The children's defense and Rourke's authoritative stand tipping the scales visibly. It seemed the cruel joke of Elowen's frailty was turning to destiny right there in the hall, her diamond resilience vindicated for all to see. Yet just as the judge lifted his gavel to deliver what looked like a ruling in their favor, a sudden commotion erupted at the back doors. A breathless rider from the livery stable burst in, snow swirling behind him, clutching a fresh telegram that had just arrived on the midnight stage. He thrust it toward the judge, panting that it was urgent. From the Eastern lawyers handling Maud's claim. The judge scanned it quickly, his expression darkening as he read aloud the new revelation. An additional affidavit from a doctor back east, dated only weeks ago, claiming Elowen's history of delicate health included episodes of nervous collapse that made her unfit for permanent custody, and demanding a full medical examination before any decision could stand. Maud's triumphant smirk returned as the hall erupted in fresh murmurs, the temporary victory shattering into uncertainty once more. The telegram's words hanging like a new storm cloud over the fragile family they had fought so hard to keep together. Elowen's hand flew to her chest, her slender body swaying slightly, as the weight of this latest betrayal from her blood hit like an avalanche, her luminous eyes seeking Rourke's in silent plea, while the children clung tighter. The unresolved legal shadow threatening to steal their hard-won hope just when it seemed within reach. Elowen's hand flew to her chest, her slender body swaying slightly as the weight of this latest betrayal from her blood hit like an avalanche, her luminous hazel-green eyes seeking Rourke's in silent plea, while the children clung tighter. The unresolved legal shadow threatening to steal their hard-won hope just when it seemed within reach. The telegram fluttered in the judge's grip under the lantern light, its crisp Eastern script spelling out the doctor's affidavit in damning detail, claiming episodes of nervous collapse that painted Elowen as unfit, fragile beyond repair, a delicate woman whose slim frame and gentle disposition could never withstand the rigors of true motherhood on the frontier. Maud's smirk deepened, her Eastern cloak swirling as she stepped closer to the head table, voice slicing through the murmurs like a fresh winter gust. "See? Even the medical men back home agree. My sister has always been prone to these spells, fainting at the slightest strain, too weak to manage a household, let alone 2 orphaned children. The papers demand a full examination before any ruling, and Moat insists it happen now, right here, so this farce can end, and the children can come home with me where they belong." The hall erupted in a low roar of voices, some townsfolk nodding along with the old familiar cruelty that had mocked Elowen at every turn, others shifting uneasily, as the children's earlier defense still echoed in their ears. The judge rapped his gavel sharply, calling for order, his face etched with the weight of the new evidence that forced a delay in the decision he had been ready to make. "This affidavit changes things," he declared, voice booming over the crowd. "We cannot ignore medical testimony from the East, especially with a formal request for examination. Mrs. Elowen, do you have any objection to a local physician verifying your health right here tonight? The council has Dr. Whitaker in attendance, and for the sake of the children's future, we must be thorough." Elowen's petite frame steadied as she drew a deep breath, her diamond-like resilience rising once more through the porcelain fragility of her skin. Her full soft lips parting to answer with quiet strength that carried across the room. "Mort have nothing to hide, Your Honor," she said, her voice flowing soft yet steady, like a mountain stream under ice. "My body may look delicate, but it has carried me through fevers, through hunger, Mort chose so the children could eat, through nights Mort sacrificed every blanket to keep them warm. If an examination is what it takes to prove Mortem fit to love them, then let it be done. But know this," she added, turning her luminous eyes toward Maud, with a calm that made her sister falter. "For the first time, my nervous spells were never collapse. They were grief, exhaustion from a family that called me burden and shipped me west to be forgotten. These children healed they kept hot, a te doctors back east never could." Rourke moved then, his towering 6'9" frame stepping forward they kept I te hot, that imposing authority that needed no raised voice to command the entire hall, his broad shoulders cutting through the crowd like a living shield as he positioned himself beside Elowen, one large hand resting protectively at the small of her back, the warmth seeping through her thin shawl and chasing the chill from her slender shoulders. "The examination will happen," he rumbled, his deep voice rolling like distant thunder across the rafters. "But it happens under my watch. Dr. Whitaker, you'll do it proper." In the side room with a matron present for decency, and Mot Luglunk stand guard outside the door myself. No Eastern paper gets to brand this woman unfit without seeing the truth with their own eyes. Mot V watched her sacrifice her own scarce comfort night after night for Thomas and Lily, seen those gentle hands brew teas that eased fevers and stitch clothes from scraps, while the town laughed and called her too frail for auction work. She stood on that stage last month, chin high, begging only for the hardest chores to survive. And Mott paid the full price not out of pity, but because Mott saw the steel no one else did. She has no burden. She is the heart this frontier runs on. The doctor, a gray-haired man with kind eyes who had treated half the town through the fever outbreak, nodded and rose, leading Elowen and a respected widow. From the front row toward the small side chamber off the main hall, Rourke followed close, his massive presence a silent vow that no one would interfere, his ice-blue eyes sweeping the room with quiet warning that made even Harlan Beck swallow hard and look away. The children stayed with Elowen until the door, Thomas clutching her skirt one last time and whispering, "You re the strongest, Mama Elowen." Dante let the mean lady win. Lily kissed her cheek with sticky sweetness before Rourke gently guided them to a bench near the stove, his tree-trunk arms wrapping each child in a blanket from his own saddle roll he had carried in earlier. The simple act, drawing soft ahs from several women in the crowd, who had once whispered the cruelest jokes about the forsaken widow. While the examination proceeded behind the closed door, the hall settled into a tense murmur. Maud, pacing near the judge's table with barely contained fury, her eastern boots clicking sharply against the floorboards as she muttered about wasted time and fragile excuses. Rourke returned to stand guard just outside the side room, his back to the wall, arms crossed over his barrel chest, the very image of stoic protection that made the air feel heavier, safer. Inside, Dr. Whitaker worked with gentle efficiency, checking Elowen's pulse, listening to her lungs, asking quiet questions about her daily life that drew out the full story of her reluctant motherhood in soft, flowing detail. She spoke of the sacred sacrifices, how she had gone without proper sleep for weeks after the fever so the children wouldn't wake alone, how her homemaking skills had turned near-empty cupboards into nourishing meals that kept them strong, how her delicate hands had foraged roots in the snow to brew remedies when the apothecary refused her credit because of her frail reputation. The doctor's expression softened with every word, nodding as he noted her steady heartbeat, her clear lungs, the quiet resilience that showed in every measured breath. The examination lasted barely 20 minutes, but to Elowen it felt like hours, her mind drifting to Rourke just beyond the door, the massive cowboy whose cleared snowpath had started all this, whose quiet authority had turned public mockery into something like hope. When she emerged, cheeks flushed from the lantern warmth, but eyes shining with renewed strength. Dr. Whitaker followed close behind, clearing his throat to address the full assembly. "The widow is in excellent health," he announced, voice carrying with professional weight. "No signs of collapse or frailty that would impair her ability to care for the children. In fact, her constitution shows remarkable endurance for one who has endured such hardship. The Eastern affidavit appears based on outdated information from before her time out west, where she has clearly thrived through sheer will and love." Moat recommend the claim be dismissed. A ripple of applause broke out from the back benches. Townsfolk, who had watched Elowen's quiet determination over the months, now shifting visibly to her side, the cruel joke of her frailty at the harvest fair, and the auction dissolving under the doctor's words and Rourke's unyielding presence. Maud's face drained of color, her gloved hands clenching at her sides as she sputtered protests about biased frontier medicine. But the judge raised his gavel again, calling for final statements before ruling. Elowen stepped back into the main hall, her petite frame, moving cape-ete hat graceful poise, despite the emotional toll, and Rourke was there instantly, his large hand guiding her to the bench where the children waited, their small faces lighting up like lanterns at her return. Thomas threw his arms around her waist, burying his face in her shawl, while Lily climbed into her lap and declared loud enough for half the room to hear. "See, Mama Elowen is strong like a diamond, just like Rourke said. She never lets the cold win." Rourke settled beside them, his massive thigh brushing Elowen's slender one in the crowded space, the contact sending a slow, warm current through her that had nothing to do with the stove and everything to do with the deepening pull between them. During the brief pause before the judge spoke again, he leaned close, his deep voice, a private rumble meant only for her ears amid the hall, slow chatter. "You handled that with more grace than any mountain Montvev ever climbed, Elowen," he murmured, his breath warm against her auburn waves. "Mort saw the fear in your eyes when that telegram came. But you stood anyway, sacrificing your privacy in front of strangers, because those little ones matter more than your pride. It moves me deeper than words. My ranch house is waiting, big and solid with fireplaces in every room, and hands ready to help, so you never have to carry a bucket alone again. But more than that, Mort wants you there as my wife. Not just under my protection, but as the woman who's already claimed my heart with her gentle strength. If the judge rules our way tonight, Mort aimed to speak the words proper at the altar come spring, with Thomas and Lily standing beside us as family whole and true." Her luminous hazel green eyes lifted to his ice blue ones, the contrast of their sizes making the moment feel profoundly intimate even in the packed hall. Her full soft lips curving into a trembling smile that held all the yearning she had buried since arriving as that mail-order bride. "You've already given me more than Mort ever dreamed, Rourke," she whispered. Back, her delicate hand slipping into his large one under the blanket, fingers intertwining with a trust that felt as natural as breathing. "Clearing the path before I woke, standing between me and every cruel word, seeing the mother in me when the town saw only frailty. My blood betrayed me, called me burden, and sent me west to fade away. But you make me believe my delicate frame was made for this, for building a home with you, for watching these children grow under our care. Mort met yours. If you Luglung have a widow whose heart beats stronger because of the giant cowboy who chose her." The slow burn heat between them flared brighter in that shared glance, his thumb tracing slow circles on the back of her hand, the promise of a future wrapping around them, like the warmest blanket she had ever known. The children sensed it too, giggling softly as Lily whispered, "Papa Rourke's gonna marry Mama Elowen and build us a snow fort every winter." Thomas nodded solemnly, his little cough long gone thanks to her herbal care, adding, "And he Luglung clear every path so your feet never get cold again." The judge called the room back to order, his voice cutting through the murmurs as he prepared to deliver the ruling, the gavel hovering, while Maud shot one last venomous look toward her sister. It seemed the scales had tipped fully now, public vindication complete, the cruel auction mockery and Eastern betrayal fading into the past under Rourke's imposing shield and Elowen's proven resilience. Harlan Beck slumped in his seat, defeated, the banker's schemes crumbling, alongside Maud's claims as the townsfolk's whispers turned to open support for the delicate widow and her giant protector. Yet just as the judge opened his mouth to speak the words that would seal their victory, the main doors burst open once more on a swirl of snow and wind, admitting a second rider from the livery, this one older and more urgent, clutching not a telegram but a thick legal packet, stamped with official seals from Helena. He strode straight to the judge's table, panting from the hard ride through fresh drifts, and handed over the packet with a grave nod. "From the territorial governor himself, sir," he announced loud enough for all to hear. "Arrived on the same stage as the Eastern woman, but held back till now. It concerns the custody and a new land claim tied to the widow's original mail order contract. The packet contains an amendment that could override everything if not addressed immediately." The judge's face tightened as he broke the seal and scanned the top page, his expression shifting from certainty to fresh concern, while the hall fell into stunned silence again. Maud's eyes lighting vacate, hat renewed malice and Elowen, a slender hand tightening in raucous grip. The sudden new legal twist from the governor's office hanging like another storm on the horizon, threatening to unravel their fragile triumph at the very edge of resolution. The judge's face tightened as he broke the seal and scanned the top page, his expression shifting from certainty to fresh concern, while the hall fell into stunned silence again, Maud's eyes lighting vacate, hat renewed malice and Elowen's slender hand tightening in raucous grip. The sudden new legal twist from the governor's office hanging like another storm on the horizon, threatening to unravel their fragile triumph at the very edge of resolution. The rider stood panting by the table, snow still clinging to his coat as the packet unfolded under the lantern glow, pages of official territorial seals and dense script that the judge read aloud, in a measured tone that carried every devastating word to the packed benches. It seemed the original mail order contract Elowen had signed 2 years earlier upon arriving west included a hidden land grant clause tied to her late husband's homestead claim, a standard frontier provision meant to encourage stable settlement but now weaponized against her. The grant for the tiny cabin and its surrounding acres would revert to territorial auction if the widow failed to establish a stable family structure, defined as marriage and proven provision within 24 months of the husband's passing. The deadline loomed in just 9 days, and Maud's Eastern lawyers had filed to accelerate the reversion, arguing that Elowen's delicate status made her incapable of fulfilling it alone, thereby opening the land to claims from blood relatives or the bank holding the original notes. Harlan Beck's smirk returned full force, the banker clearly the shadow architect behind this final strike, while Maud stepped forward with triumph etched across her sharp features. "This changes everything," the judge continued, his voice heavy as he looked between Elowen's petite frame and the towering giant beside her. "Without immediate compliance, the children cannot remain in an unstable household, and the land itself passes out of her hands. Mrs. Elowen, the law is clear on such grants. A marriage must be contracted and witnessed before this body tonight if you wish to retain custody and the property. Otherwise, the Eastern claim takes precedence at first light." The words crashed over the hall like an avalanche, gasps rippling through the crowd as the cruel irony settled heavy in the air. The very system that had shipped Elowen west as a fragile mail-order bride now demanding she secure a husband in front of the same people who had mocked her frailty for months. Elowen felt her luminous hazel-green eyes sting vacate, hat fresh tears. She blinked back fiercely, her heart-shaped face flushing under the weight of every gaze, her slim 5'1" frame trembling not from weakness, but from the sacred fire of resilience that had carried her through every betrayal. Maud's laughter rang out sharp and victorious, echoing off the rafters. "See? Even the governor's office knows the truth. My sister is too delicate to stand alone, too much the burden we always said she was. Sign the papers now, Elowen, hand over the children, and spare yourself this public spectacle. No man here will tie himself to a porcelain doll who faints at hard work. Rourke's massive chest rose once, slow and deliberate, his ice-blue eyes narrowing on the judge with that quiet, imposing authority that made the entire room feel smaller around his 6'9" frame. He did not shout, did not clench a fist, yet the power radiating from his barrel-wide shoulders and tree-trunk arms stilled every whisper as he stepped forward, guiding Elowen gently with one large hand at the small of her back, the warmth of his calloused palm chasing the chill from her slender shoulders through the thin fabric of her shawl. "The land grant stands fulfilled tonight," he rumbled, voice deep and steady like the Rockies themselves. "Moat claim Elowen as my wife, right here, before this council and every witness in this hall. My ranch borders her homestead. My provision is more than enough for 10 families, and my name carries the weight to make it legal under territorial law." Mott V cleared her paths through the first snow so her delicate feet never touched the cold, split wood, so her gentle hands never strained, stood between her and every cruel word the town or her blood could throw. She has sacrificed every comfort for those children, turned her homemaking talents into miracles that kept them fed and warm when the banker here refused her credit. And the town laughed at Motpaf at the Harvest Fair auction. Mott saw her there, chin high, begging only for the hardest work to survive, and Mott paid full price because Mott recognized the diamond strength no one else bothered to see. She is no burden. She is the woman who heals what this frontier breaks, and Moat will marry her tonight if she luglunk have me. Not out of law, but out of the love that's been growing since the moment Moat watched her pour every last drop of herself into Thomas and Lily. The declaration landed with the force of his stoic presence, the public vindication so complete that several women in the crowd dabbed at their eyes, the cruel mockery that had defined Elowen's life cracking wide open under the giant Cowboy's shield. Thomas and Lily broke from the bench and rushed to Elowen, their small bodies pressing against her petite frame as Thomas declared loud and clear, "You gonna be our real papa, Rourke?" "Because Mama Elowen already is the best mama, and she needs someone big like you to keep the mean people away." Lily nodded, her tiny hand tugging at Rourke's leather vest. "Please say yes, Mama Elowen." He cleared the snow so we could play outside without freezing, and he carried me on his shoulders like Moat was flying. "You always give us your blankets, but now you can have his warmth too." The children's innocent recognition of her worth wrapped around Elowen's heart like healing balm, their voices piping through the hall and melting even harder faces among the townsfolk who had once sneered at the forsaken widow's fragile appearance. Elowen lifted her luminous eyes to Rourke's rugged face, the contrast between her delicate porcelain skin and his weathered square jaw, dark beard, and piercing gaze, creating a pull so profound it stole her breath. The slow burn fire that had kindled in the cabin, through shared coffee and late-night confessions by the fire, through his gentle thumb brushing snow from her cheek, now blazed full and undeniable in front of the entire town. Her full soft lips parted, voice flowing soft and trembling, yet filled with diamond resolve as she wove her fingers through his large hand. "Rourke, you have seen me at my most broken. When my own blood abandoned me and called me too frail for this life, when the town paraded me at that auction like a joke because my slim body looked too weak to scrub floors or carry water. You stood guard, while I sacrificed my last warmth for these children, while my gentle hands brewed teas from foraged roots to ease their fevers and mended their clothes from scraps when the apothecary turned me away. You cleared that path before dawn, so my bare feet never touched the freezing snow, proving your protection before Moat even knew Moat needed it. Mott came west as a mail-order bride hoping for safety, but Mott found something deeper in you, this towering silent protector, whose imposing authority turns cruelty to dust. If the law demands a marriage tonight to keep my family whole, then yes. Moat accept with all my yearning heart, because you make my delicate frame feel strong enough for forever. The hall erupted in a wave of applause that drowned Maud's furious protests, the public vindication complete as the judge called for the territorial clerk to prepare the simple vows on the spot. The ceremony unfolding right there under the lanterns, with the children standing proudly between them, like living proof of reluctant motherhood turned sacred destiny. Rourke knelt briefly to the children's level, his massive frame folding with surprising grace, and placed one large hand on each small head. "You two have shown me what family means," he told them quietly, voice rumbling with emotion. "Your mama's heart is bigger than my whole ranch. And Moat aimed to spend every day making sure it never feels the cold again." Thomas grinned through happy tears, and Lily threw her arms around his thick neck, declaring him the best mountain papa ever. Elowen watched, her slender body swaying with overwhelming feeling, as Rourke rose and took her hands in both of his. The contrast of his strength against her soft palms sending slow waves of trust and desire through her veins. The vows came simple and profound, spoken in Rourke's deep authoritative tone and Elowen's gentle flowing one, witnessed by the entire council and half the town who had arrived to mock but stayed to cheer. The judge pronounced them man and wife under territorial law. The land grant secured, custody affirmed, Maud's claims dismissed with a final gavel strike that echoed like justice finally served. Harlan Beck slunk from the hall without a word, defeated, while Maud gathered her cloak cape ite hot venomous glares but no power left to fight. The townsfolk pressed forward to offer congratulations, some women pressing small gifts into Elowen's hands, homemade jams and knitted shawls, their earlier cruelty replaced by genuine warmth, as they saw the fragile widow's resilience vindicated at last. Yet, in the quiet corner after the formalities, as the children dozed against Rourke's broad chest wrapped in his heavy coat, Elowen leaned into her new husband's side, her petite frame fitting perfectly against his massive warmth. The slow burn romance that had simmered through snow and betrayal now blooming into something deep and healing. They spoke in low, intimate tones, her head resting on his shoulder as she traced patterns on his flannel sleeve. "Moat never dreamed this," she whispered, her voice a long sensory flow of emotion that slowed the very air around them. Night's Moat lay shivering after giving the last blanket to Thomas and Lily, wondering if my delicate body would ever be enough, if anyone would see past the frailty my blood mocked and the town auctioned. "You changed that with one cleared path, Rourke, with your quiet watchfulness, and the way your large hands split wood so gently Moot could reach every log. You make me believe can be the mother these children deserve and the wife who brings warmth to your lonely ranch." He tilted her chin with one finger, ice blue, his eyes soft with a tenderness reserved only for her, his thumb brushing her full lower lip in a touch that sent sparks through her slender form. "You already are, Elowen," he murmured, the words rumbling from deep in his chest like a vow renewed. "Moat lost my first family to fever years ago and swore off closeness, but your diamond heart cracked every wall Moat built. Watching you sacrifice for those little ones, hearing them call you mama with such love, it healed the empty places in me too. Come spring we Luglunk stand before a proper preacher with flowers and music, but tonight, in this with the snow falling outside and our family safe, Moat claim you as mine in every way that matters. My ranch house waits, big enough for laughter and extra blankets you Luglunk never have to give away again. We Luglunk build slow and true, one cleared path at a time." Their lips met then in their first real kiss, soft and lingering, full of the profound trust and yearning that had grown through every shared hardship, the contrast of his rugged strength and her ethereal delicacy, creating a perfect balance that made the world fade away for one long, healing moment. The children stirred sleepily and smiled, Thomas whispering that now they had a real papa who would keep the wind from blowing too hard, Lily adding that Mama Elowen's cheeks looked like roses in the snow. The hall emptied slowly, well-wishers offering rides or supplies for the journey back, the night air crisp and hopeful, as Rourke lifted the sleeping children into the wagon with effortless care, then helped Elowen up beside him, his arm wrapping around her slender shoulders to shield her from the wind. The ride home through the fresh snow felt like gliding on clouds, the cleared path from her cabin, still visible in the moonlight, a symbol of the protection that had started everything. They talked of the future in long flowing sentences, Elowen describing how her homemaking skills would Teuro his ranch kitchen into a place of abundance. Rourke, promising to teach Thomas ranch ways, Vekep bite hot, gentle strength, and carry Lily on his shoulders until she laughed like bells. The slow burn intimacy deepened Vekep ite hot, every shared breath, their joined hands resting on the bench, Between them, the promise of quiet nights, by a bigger fire and mornings where her feet never touched cold ground wrapping around them like the warmest quilt. Yet as the wagon crested the final ridge, and the lights of LON's small cabin came into view alongside the distant glow of Rourke's sprawling ranch house beyond, a lone rider appeared on the horizon, galloping hard through the drifts with a lantern swinging wildly. He reined in beside them, breathless and urgent, thrusting another sealed envelope into Rourke's hand. "From the territorial office, sir," the rider panted, snow flying from his horse's flanks. "The governor's amendment had a final condition we missed in the packet. The marriage must be consummated and witnessed by a local official within 48 hours. Or the entire land grant reverts regardless. A safeguard against fraudulent unions in frontier claims. The banker's already riding to Helena to contest it at dawn. You've got till the end of tomorrow night." Elowen's breath caught sharp in the cold air, her delicate hand flying to her chest as the fresh revelation hit like another cruel twist of fate. The hard-won victory suddenly balanced on the edge of one final intimate and deeply personal decision that could secure their family forever, or see it all slip away once more, leaving her heart pounding with a mix of hope, desire, and the lingering shadow of every time she had been called too fragile to hold on to happiness. LON's breath caught sharp in the cold air as the rider's words sank in, her delicate hand flying to her chest while the lantern light swung wildly across the fresh snow, casting long shadows that made the night feel suddenly heavier around the wagon. The territorial condition hit like another cruel twist from the very frontier that had tested her fragile frame from the moment she arrived west as a mail-order bride, demanding not just the public vows spoken in the hall, but a consummation witnessed by a local official within 48 hours, or the entire land grant would revert. The children lost to Eastern claims, the cabin and its hard-won stability slipping away like melting snow. Maud's desperate last ploy through the banker now had teeth. Harlan Beck, already riding hard toward Helena to contest every technicality, and the thought sent a wave of raw vulnerability through LON's slender body, her luminous hazel-green eyes lifting to Rourke's rugged face in silent search for the steady anchor she had come to trust with every beat of her yearning heart. Rourke's massive hand tightened on the reins, his 6'9" frame shifting on the wagon bench with quiet authority that never needed volume to command the storm, his ice-blue eyes narrowing toward the distant lights of his sprawling ranch house just beyond the ridge while the children slept soundly between them under thick blankets. "We'll handle it proper and true." "Elowen," he rumbled low, the deep timbre of his voice wrapping around her like the warmest flannel against the biting wind. "No one's taking what we've built tonight. Not the banker, not your blood, not some dusty clause, meant for men who marry, without seeing the diamond in a delicate woman like you. Mott cleared that first path before you even woke, so your feet never touched the cold. And Mott clear this one too, gentle as you need. Because what's between us ain't a legal requirement. It's the natural next step of two hearts that already chose each other in the snow and the firelight." His free arm slid around her petite shoulders, drawing her closer against his barrel chest, until the steady thud of his heartbeat steadied her own. The contrast of his immense strength and her slim 5'1" fragility feeling like perfect balance, rather than burden for the first time in her life. The wagon rolled on through the moonlit drifts, the cleared path from her old cabin still visible, like a promise carved into the landscape, and Elowen let herself lean fully into him, her long wavy auburn hair spilling across his flannel sleeve as the slow burn warmth between them deepened with every creak of the wheels. She spoke then in long, flowing sentences that slowed the very rhythm of the night, her voice soft and sensory as she poured out the fears she had carried since her blood betrayed her back east. Mott was always the fragile one. Rourke, the one they packed off they kept hot, a one-way ticket, because my slim body and gentle disposition made me too much of a burden for their society world. My sister Maud sneered that Mott D never survive a real marriage or motherhood, that my hands were made for lace and tea parties, not frontier survival. When the fever took my first husband, Mott thought the mockery would end, but the town only laughed harder at the auction, parading me like a joke because I looked too weak to scrub floors or haul water. Yet Mort sacrificed every extra blanket, every last morsel, every hour of rest to keep Thomas and Lily warm and fed, using these delicate hands to forage roots in the snow and brew teas that chased their coughs away when no one else cared. Your protection changed everything. You saw the resilience under the porcelain skin, the heart that never quit even when my own blood called me worthless. And now this condition, it feels like one more test, but with you. It doesn't scare me. It feels like the sacred closing of a circle we started when you cleared that path before dawn. Rourke listened without interrupting, his large thumb tracing slow circles on her shoulder through the shawl, the touch so reverent it sent healing waves through her yearning soul. Mot le o ete my first family young, he confessed in return, voice rumbling like distant thunder softened by the night. Built this ranch from nothing, because loneliness carved deep grooves in a man my size, grooves I thought nothing could fill. Then, Mott saw you struggling with that shovel your arms weren't built for. Watched you pour every comfort into those little ones the town sneered, and something in me woke up. Mott ain't he, claiming you tonight, out of law or deadline. Mort met claiming you because your gentle strength moves me deeper than any cattle drive or gold strike ever could. We'll do this right, with respect and care, witnessed proper so no one can ever challenge it again. But first we get the children settled warm and safe in the big house where they belong, where there's fireplaces in every room and extra blankets you look never have to give away. They reached the ranch house just as the clock inside struck 2 in the morning, the sprawling log structure, glowing with lanterns left burning by his trusted hands, who had already prepared for their arrival. Rourke lifted the sleeping children with effortless power, carrying Thomas and Lily inside like precious cargo, their small heads nestled against his broad shoulders as Elowen followed, her petite frame moving hat graceful exhaustion through the wide doorway into a home that felt instantly like sanctuary. The main room was vast yet cozy, heavy timbers and stone fireplaces, crackling with fresh logs, thick rugs covering the floors so her delicate feet met only warmth, and a long table already set with simple nourishing food his housekeeper had prepared from the ranch stores. The children stirred only briefly, as Rourke tucked them into the big guest room he had readied earlier that day, complete with extra quilts and a night-light lantern. Thomas murmuring in his sleep about how Mama Elowen's new papa made everything safe, and Lily sighing happily as she clutched her rag doll. Elowen bent to kiss their foreheads, her slender fingers stroking their hair with infinite tenderness, whispering promises of pancakes in the morning. And snow forts built together as a real family, her homemaking heart already envisioning the abundant meals she would create in this larger kitchen to heal every scar of scarcity they had known. Once the children slept deep and sound, Rourke led her to the master chamber at the end of the hall, the room massive yet intimate with its wide bed piled high with down comforters, a fire roaring in the hearth, and soft lamplight casting golden glows across the wooden walls. He closed the door softly behind them. The local official, a trusted old friend from the council, who had ridden ahead at Rourke, as quiet request, now waiting discreetly in the adjoining sitting room with his ledger and witness seal, giving them privacy for the sacred moments that mattered most. Elowen's heart pounded with a mix of nervous hope and profound trust as she turned to her new husband, her luminous eyes searching, his rugged face in the firelight. The slow burn romance that had kindled through snow and betrayal, now reaching its tender crescendo. Moot met not afraid, she whispered, stepping closer until her petite frame brushed the solid wall of his chest, her full soft lips trembling with emotion. My body may look fragile, but it has carried me through losses that would break stronger women. Tonight is tea about the law or the deadline. It's about choosing you fully, letting your gentle strength heal the places my blood and the town tried to shatter. Mott trust you, Rourke, with every delicate inch of me because you've shown me time and again that true protection feels like warmth, not chains. He cupped her heart-shaped face in his large gentle hands, tilting her chin with infinite care so their gazes locked, his ice-blue eyes burning with a depth that made the fire seem dim. You honor me more than any man deserves, Elowen, he murmured, the words flowing slow and sensory as his thumbs brushed her porcelain cheeks. Mott V watched you sacrifice your scarce comfort for those babies night after night, seen your resilient spirit shine brighter than any ranch fire. While the world called you too frail, tonight Mot vowed to be as careful with you as Mot was clearing that first snowpath, moving slow and sure so you feel only safety and love. This marriage was sealed in the hall with witnesses and words. But here in our home it becomes whole in the quiet way that matters. Two souls joining without rush or force. Just the natural coming together of a giant who has finally found his match in a delicate woman whose heart outweighs mountains. The official will witness the simple affirmation after. Nothing more invasive than a signed statement of consent and completion. Because frontier law allows it when trust is this deep. But right now it is just us, Elowen. Just you and me building the foundation no Eastern claim or banker can ever touch. They came together then in the soft firelight, with a tenderness that wove every pillar of their story into one profound moment of healing. Rourke's imposing size moving, with surprising reverence around her slender form, his tree-trunk arms cradling her like the most precious thing on the frontier, while her gentle hands explored the solid warmth of his chest, tracing the flannel and leather that had shielded her from every storm. The intimacy unfolded slow and sacred, full of whispered confessions and lingering touches that chased away the last shadows of her past betrayals, her delicate resilience meeting his quiet authority in perfect harmony, as years of loneliness melted into shared breath and profound connection. Elowen felt her body and spirit open, like the first spring thaw, the yearning heart that had survived rejection, and mockery finally blooming under his protective care. Every gentle caress affirming that her fragile appearance had never been a weakness but the very quality that called forth his deepest honor. He spoke to her throughout in low, rumbling tones of love and promise, telling her how her homemaking miracles had already saved more lives than she knew, how the children's instant love for her had cracked his walls wide open, how watching her stand tall against Maud and the council had made him prouder than any cattle herd or land deal. She responded with flowing words of gratitude and desire, describing how his cleared pay-a-te hot had been the first time she felt truly seen, how his public defense had healed the wounds of the auction and her blood's abandonment, how his massive presence made her feel safe enough to be soft and strong all at once. When the quiet moments of union reached their natural, healing conclusion, they lay wrapped together under the heavy comforters, her petite frame nestled perfectly against his broad chest, the fire crackling low as the official stepped in briefly from the adjoining room to witness their calm, consensual affirmation and seal the ledger with a simple dated statement that would stand in any territorial court. The man left with quiet respect, closing the door softly, and Rourke pulled Elowen closer, his large hand stroking her long auburn waves as the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky beyond the window. "You've given me back a family. Not thought lost forever," he said, voice thick with emotion that made his stoic features soften completely. "Those children sleeping down the hall are ours now, and this ranch is ours to fill with laughter and warmth you Luglunk never have to sacrifice again. Your gentle talents will Te-Uro know this house into a home that heals everyone who enters, just like you healed me." Elowen smiled against his skin, her luminous eyes heavy with peaceful exhaustion, yet bright with the diamond resilience that had carried her through every trial, her slender fingers tracing lazy patterns on his arm as she spoke of the future in long sensory sentences. "Mort can already see the mornings, Rourke, waking to find you've cleared any new snow before Mort stir. The children running to a kitchen filled with the bread Mort Luglung bake from full pantries, and the teas Mort Luglung brew not from desperation but abundance. My delicate hands were never useless. They were waiting for a man who saw their true worth, for little ones who called me mama without question, for a love that makes frailty feel like the most beautiful strength of all. We've turned the cruel joke of my mail order arrival and the town's mockery into destiny, and tomorrow when the banker rides back empty-handed, we Luglung stand together as the family no law can break." They drifted into restful sleep then, bodies and hearts entwined in the afterglow of profound trust. The ranch house quiet except for the soft breathing of the children down the hall and the distant lowing of cattle safe in their barns. Hours passed in healing slumber, the first true rest Elowen had known in months, her slim frame no longer tense with the weight of survival, but relaxed in the shelter of her giant husband's arms. When they woke near midday, the house bustled gently. They Kepite hat ranch hands, bringing fresh supplies, and congratulations. The news of the midnight wedding and the official sealing, spreading like warm wind across the spread, turning former skeptics into allies who offered help with chores so the new family could settle in peace. The children bounded into the master chamber with joyful energy, Thomas and Lily climbing onto the big bed to shower kisses on both their new parents, declaring the house the biggest and warmest castle in Montana, and begging for stories about how the mountain man had cleared the snow just for Mama Elowen. Elowen laughed softly, her voice like bells as she rose in her simple nightgown and moved to the kitchen with graceful purpose, her homemaking skills already transforming the space as she prepared a lavish midday meal from the stocked larder, pancakes piled high with syrup and fresh butter, eggs from the henhouse, and hot coffee that filled the air with rich aroma. Rourke watched from the table, his ice-blue eyes filled with quiet pride as she worked, her delicate hands moving, Vekepite hot, efficient joy that made the ranch feel alive in ways it never had. The children chattering happily about future snowmen and riding lessons, while he promised to teach them both with the same gentle strength he showed their mother. The afternoon unfolded in perfect domestic warmth, Rourke stepping outside briefly to split more wood and check the stock, while Elowen and the children decorated the main room with evergreen boughs from the ranch pines, turning the house into a celebration of their new beginning. Every touch, every shared glance between husband and wife carried the deepened intimacy of the night before. The slow-burn romance, now fully kindled into a steady flame that promised years of healing and growth. She caught him watching her with that protective intensity, and when the children napped again after lunch, she drew him close in the quiet kitchen, rising on tiptoe to press a kiss to his bearded jaw and whisper how his love had made her feel unbreakable at last. Yet as the sun dipped toward the western peaks and the 48-hour window closed with the official papers already sealed and safe in the ranch safe, a lone rider appeared on the horizon once more, galloping hard through the snow with urgent purpose. Rourke stepped onto the porch to meet him, his massive frame tense as the man reined in and thrust a fresh telegram into his hand, panting that it had just arrived from Helena. The banker made it there before dawn and filed an emergency override, the rider explained breathlessly. Claims the witness statement is invalid because the official was present for the full private ceremony. Demands a full public re-examination of the consummation condition or the grant reverts immediately, and the children go east with Maud on the morning stage. The territorial governor is convening a special hearing at first light tomorrow, and Maud is already on her way back with new lawyers. Elowen stepped out beside her husband, her slender hand slipping into his, as the color drained from her porcelain cheeks, the children's laughter drifting from inside the house like a painful reminder of everything still hanging in the balance, the final unresolved shadow of doubt and betrayal, threatening to steal their hard-won family, just as the first real healing had begun to take root. The lone rider's telegram fluttered in the cold wind like one last cruel joke from the frontier itself, but Elowen felt something unbreakable rise inside her petite frame as she stood beside her husband on the wide ranch porch, her slender hand tightening in Rourke's massive grip, while the children's laughter drifted out from the warm house behind them, like a living reminder of everything worth fighting for one final time. The banker had reached Helena before dawn and twisted the witness statement into doubt, claiming the private ceremony lacked full official presence for the consummation condition, demanding either a humiliating public re-examination or the immediate reversion of the land grant and the children to Maud on the morning stage. The territorial governor himself had called a special hearing at first light tomorrow, Maud already speeding back, with fresh Eastern lawyers armed, with more affidavits painting Elowen as the same frail burden her blood had always declared her to be. Yet as the rider wheeled his horse and galloped away into the gathering dusk, Elowen lifted her luminous hazel-green eyes to Rourke's rugged face and spoke with a quiet diamond strength that made the winter air itself seem to pause. "We go together at dawn," she said, her voice soft but flowing with the same resilient grace that had carried her through every snowdrift and betrayal. Moat Vas sacrificed too much, loved too deeply, and trusted too fully to let one more technicality steal our family now. My delicate hands have turned scraps into suppers and fear into home for Thomas and Lily, and your cleared paths have shown me that true protection never asks me to be anything but exactly who Moat am. Rourke's ice-blue eyes softened. They kept Ite had profound pride as he pulled her close against his barrel chest, his tree-trunk arms wrapping around her slim, 5'1" frame with the same gentle reverence he had shown since the first snow. "We ride at first light," he rumbled, the deep authority in his voice, carrying across the ranch yard, where his hands had already begun saddling horses and preparing the wagon. "No public spectacle this time, Elowen. Just us standing as man and wife before the governor himself, with the children right beside us and the official who sealed our papers riding as witness." Moat V sent riders ahead to every corner of my spread and into town, calling in the men and women who saw us in that hall last night. The same folks who once mocked you at the auction, but now know the truth of your resilient heart. This ends at dawn, not with force but with the simple weight of what we've built together. The night passed in a cocoon of quiet preparation and deepening intimacy, the big ranch house glowing with lantern light as Elowen moved through the kitchen with her graceful homemaking talents, turning the stocked larder into a feast that filled the air with the rich aroma of fresh bread and hearty stew, nourishing every ranch hand who had volunteered to ride with them at dawn. The children stayed close, Thomas helping carry kindling with his thin arms, while Lily perched on Elowen's hip, chattering about how their new mama's hands made everything warm and safe. Rourke watched from the doorway, his massive frame filling the space as he split extra wood outside so her delicate fingers would never have to strain, each swing of the axe precise and controlled, while his mind turned over the final plan. He had sent word to the governor's office through trusted channels, a quiet assertion of his land holdings and public declaration that no technicality could undo what the midnight vows and witnessed affirmation had already sealed. But mostly he simply held Elowen close when the children finally slept, their bodies entwined under the heavy comforters once more, the slow burn love between them flowing in long sensory waves of whispered promises and tender touches that healed every last scar of her forsaken past. Dawn broke clear and cold over the Rockies as they rode into Helena, the wagon wheels crunching through fresh snow, while Rourke's trusted men flanked them like a quiet army of support. The governor's chamber was smaller than the Whispering Pines Hall, but heavier with official weight. Wood-paneled walls lined, they kept hot maps of the territory, and a long table where the governor himself sat flanked by clerks and the same Helena judge from the night before. Maud stood on one side with her new lawyers, her Eastern cloak still dusted with travel grime. Harlan Beck hovering behind her with a smug expression that faltered the moment. Rourke's towering 6'9" frame ducked through the doorway and filled the room with his imposing presence. Elowen walked beside him, her petite form wrapped in the new wool shawl one of the ranch women had pressed into her hands the night before, her long, wavy auburn hair pinned neatly yet flowing soft around her heart-shaped face, chin high with the same diamond resilience that had turned every cruel joke into destiny. The governor cleared his throat, scanning the fresh packet of challenges before looking up at the couple and the two small children who clung bravely to Elowen's skirt. "The claim before us questions the validity of last night's witnessed affirmation," he stated, voice measured and grave. "The territorial clause requires clear proof of a stable union to secure the land grant and custody. We moete hear testimony and render a final decision before the morning stage departs." Maud seized the moment, her voice sharp as she pointed a gloved finger at her sister. "This delicate woman has always been a burden, Governor. Her own family sent her west because her frail body and nervous spells made her unfit for any real responsibility. The auction in Whispering Pines proved it. The town laughed when no one would bid on her labor because she looked ready to snap like a winter twig, and now she hides behind this giant rancher's name to keep land that should revert to bloodkin who can actually manage it. Examine her again if you must. The law demands proof." The room tensed, but Elowen stepped forward before Rourke could speak. Her luminous, hazel-green eyes, steady as she wove her story in a long, flowing voice that filled the chamber with emotional truth. Mott was betrayed by my own blood. Governor shipped away as a mail-order bride, because they called me too fragile for their world. When fever took my first husband, Mott took in these orphan children, because their eyes saw worth in me that my family never did. Mott sacrificed every blanket, every bite of food, every hour of sleep so Thomas and Lily would not know cold or hunger. My gentle hands foraged roots in the snow and brewed healing teas when the town apothecary refused me credit. At that cruel auction, Mott stood in my patched dress and begged only for the hardest work to survive, not because Mott was weak, but because my resilient heart refused to break. Rourke saw that heart. He cleared a path through the first snow, before Mott even woke so my bare feet never touched the freezing ground. He stood publicly, in whispering pines, and claimed us when the council tried to take the children. Last night we consummated our union vacep te hat full consent and respect, witnessed and sealed as the law requires, mortem no burden. Mortem a mother, a wife, and a woman whose delicate frame holds a strength forged in sacrifice and love. Thomas tugged her skirt then, his small voice piping clear and brave through the chamber. Mama Elowen is tea-frail, he declared to the governor. She gives us her blankets every night and sings when the wind scares us. She is the strongest mama because she never quits, even when her arms shake. Lily nodded fiercely beside him, adding, and Rourke is our papa now. He carried me on his shoulders and said, our family is bigger than any snowstorm. They saw her true worth from the very beginning. Innocent eyes recognizing the diamond resilience no Eastern doctor or town gossip could dim. Rourke stepped beside his wife, his massive presence radiating quiet authority that made the governor sit straighter, and modest lawyers shift uneasily. The land grant is secured by marriage and provision, he stated simply, voice low and commanding, without ever rising. My ranch adjoins the homestead. My hands and resources provide for 10 times what Elowen and the children need. Mott watched her sacrifice, her scarce comfort, night after night while the banker here plotted to seize what wasn't his. Mott paid full price at that auction not out of charity, but because her quiet determination shattered every wall Mott had built around my own lonely heart. The official who witnessed our union last night rides vacep ite hat us today and will swear again under oath. This hearing is the last cruel joke the frontier tried to play on a resilient woman and the giant who chose to stand with her. We end it now. The official stepped forward then, ledger in hand, and swore to the full details of the private yet consensual affirmation, his words carrying the weight of frontier honesty that no Eastern affidavit could match. The governor listened, eyes moving from the children's hopeful faces to Elowen, a steady gaze to Rourke, s unyielding frame, and finally nodded with a slow smile that broke the tension like spring sun on snow. The claims are dismissed, he ruled, gavel falling with finality. The marriage stands, the land grant secure, and custody remains with Mr. and Mrs. Rourke as the stable family they have proven themselves to be. Modest lawyers may file appeals until the cows come home, but territorial law favors vacep hatate works on the ground, and what Mott see here works better than any paper from back east. Maud stormed from the chamber in a swirl of cloak and fury, Harlan Beck slinking after her like a shadow finally banished. Their defeat complete as the room erupted, in quiet applause from the ranch hands and local witnesses who had ridden through the night to stand for the truth. Elowen turned into Rourke's arms right there, her petite frame melting against his massive chest as tears of pure relief and joy slipped down her porcelain cheeks. The public vindication, last washing away every cruel mockery, every betrayal by blood, every moment she had been called too frail for this life. The children rushed to join them, small arms wrapping around both parents in a circle of healing that felt like the very heart of the frontier beating strong and true. The ride back to the ranch stretched long and golden under the winter sun, the wagon filled with laughter as Thomas and Lily recounted the hearing like a grand adventure. Their innocent faith in Mama Elowen and Papa Rourke sealing the victory in ways no law ever could. Elowen nestled against her husband's side, her slender hand resting on his thigh as the slow burn romance that had begun with a cleared snow path bloomed into the deep, abiding love of a lifetime. She spoke in long flowing sentences of the future, describing how her homemaking skills would fill the big house with the aroma of fresh bread and herbal teas made now from abundance rather than desperation. How she would teach Lily to stitch quilts and Thomas to tend the garden with the same gentle hands that had once been mocked. Rourke listened, his ice-blue eyes warm with quiet pride, promising to keep every path clear and every fire burning so her delicate beauty would thrive rather than merely survive. Back at the ranch, the hands had prepared a celebration. Tables groaning under food and the main room decorated, they kept it hot evergreen, and the first forced blooms from the greenhouse Rourke had quietly ordered weeks ago. The family gathered around the long table, Elowen serving heaping plates. They kept it hot graceful joy, while Rourke carved the roast with his large careful hands. The children chattering about snow forts and riding ponies and the big family Christmas. They would celebrate. They kept real trees and presents for everyone. That night, after the children slept deep in their new rooms filled, they kept it hot warmth and love, Elowen and Rourke retired to the master chamber once more, the intimacy between them flowing even deeper now that every shadow had lifted, their bodies and hearts joining in a sacred dance of trust and passion that healed the last lingering wounds of her forsaken past. She traced the lines of his rugged face with her soft fingers, whispering how his imposing authority had become the safest harbor she had ever known, while he held her close and told her how her resilient spirit had taught a giant man that true strength lived in gentleness and sacrifice. Spring came soft and green to the Montana ranch, wildflowers carpeting the fields as Elowen stood beside Rourke before the proper preacher in the town square, Thomas and Lily holding flower baskets and grinning ear to ear while the same townsfolk who had once sneered now cheered with genuine warmth. The ceremony was simple and profound, vows renewed in the sunlight with the land grant papers framed on the wall of their home, as a reminder of the journey that had turned cruelty into destiny. Elowen's delicate frame had never looked more beautiful, her slim waist now showing the first gentle swell of new life. A child conceived in love and security who would grow up knowing only the protection of a giant father and the resilient heart of a mother who had sacrificed everything and received the world in return. Years unfolded in quiet abundance on the ranch, the children thriving under Elowen's gentle guidance and Rourke's steady strength, Thomas learning to ride with his papa's patient hands guiding the reins, and Lily stitching her first quilt under her mama's watchful eye. The forsaken widow had become the beloved heart of the household, her homemaking talents saving more than one harsh winter for neighboring families who now sought her herbal remedies and warm bread with open gratitude. Rourke's imposing authority kept the spread thriving, but it was Elowen's diamond resilience that turned the house into a beacon of healing for any lost soul who wandered their way, just as she had once healed 2 motherless children and a lonely giant cowboy. And on quiet winter mornings, when the first snow fell soft and sudden, Rourke still rose before dawn, shovel in hand, clearing a perfect path from the big house door all the way to the barn and the woodpile, so that Elowen's bare feet never once had to touch the cold. She would wake to find him standing there, like the mountain he had always been, waiting with a steaming mug of coffee and a slow smile that still made her heart stutter after all the years. Wait, he would rumble softly as she stepped out, just as he had that very first morning, and she would laugh and pull him inside where the fire burned bright, and the children called for breakfast, and the life they had built together wrapped around them, like the warmest blanket in all of Montana. If this story of a delicate widow finding unbreakable love with her towering cowboy protector has touched something deep in your own heart, do me a favor and leave a like right now. Subscribe so you never miss another tale of frontier resilience and quiet healing, and drop a comment telling me which moment moved you most. This is a work of fiction created solely for entertainment and educational purposes. The characters, events, and situations in this story are entirely imaginary. Any resemblance to real people or real events is purely coincidental. This content was created with the aid of AI tools and has been carefully edited. All rights reserved.